We're going to be recording this presentation. This is Jennifer King. She's a practitioner-researcher at the Hope Center for Community College and Justice. In her work, she supports the empowerment of colleges and universities seeking to advance their basic needs, resources, and programming for student success. Prior to joining the Hope Center, Dr. King progressively developed her skills in project management in both face-to-face and remote technical assistance and training in community nutrition. So her background degree is a training in nutrition and public health from Kent State University and Bowling Green State University, with an interest in helping to secure basic needs supports for college students. And with that, we're very happy to have her talking with us today about impact of socioeconomic stress on undergraduate students. So I will just turn it over to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you so much, everyone who is joining us today. As Andrea mentioned, today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about bridging the gap and what does that gap really mean for your students and could quite possibly even mean for yourself. Definitely as it relates to basic needs supports on campus, external to campus. We were just talking a minute ago about how the pandemic has really exacerbated what students are going through as far as being able to find something to eat and it being something that's healthy to eat, not necessarily just ramen noodles or Easy Mac, having safe and secure housing, transportation to and from campus, childcare, healthcare, mental health as well. There are so many things that kind of wrap itself into what our basic needs supports and taking a look at how socioeconomic status can really make a difference in the supports that are available to students and how they may seek to access those supports going forward. So let's get ourselves started. First, I want you to kind of think about, would you rather? So in thinking about food insecurity, housing insecurity, and even homelessness, would you rather lose your wallet or lose your cell phone? Now, the reason why I'm asking this type of question is because it has so many implications into how our lives really revolve around our cell phones or around our wallets that we carry. Or if you have a cell phone, maybe you don't carry a wallet. But just think about if you don't have what are considered kind of necessities for your everyday living. You can also think about it in the same way of food, housing, anything else that is considered a basic need for your students. So in 2020, fall 2020 to be exact, the Hope Center administered its Real College Survey. And in that Real College Survey, they took a look at what types of basic needs and insecurities are being faced or experienced by students. The information that you see on the screen today is really just showing you how basic needs and insecurities in the light of the pandemic really affected both 2-year and 4-year students. 3 and 5 experienced some kind of basic needs insecurity. 39% of students who replied to the survey, regardless of where they were enrolled, they felt that they had some worry about whether they were going to be able to find money before running out of food. 23% indicated that they were not able to pay a utility. They weren't able to pay their rent on time or their mortgage on time. Now, thinking about housing insecurity or homelessness, 11% noted that they had stayed with a friend, they may have couch surfed, and 5% left their home, definitely as residence halls may have been closing. You may have experienced that yourself. 5% of students who responded to the survey said that they left an unsafe situation. Now, Think about all of these challenges that someone can face, and they still want to show up for class every single day. Think about how hard that might be. As an instructor or an instructor to be, think about how hard it might be to connect with a student who's going through these things. Now, I wanted to briefly mention about where these gaps exist and really where these disparities exist, because there is some alignment with looking at the disparities that are on your screen now in kind of alignment with socioeconomic status. So as students are enrolled in college, we're seeing that there are gaps in between race, in between having a dependent at home, whether they are your child or a sibling at home, and definitely between our 2 and 4 year students. And you can see some variation in those percentage points in regard to how basic needs and security really showed up for these particular populations. Now, just like anyone else in the general population, college students definitely felt other impacts of the pandemic. Now, among those who were enrolled in college in spring 2020, 72% indicated that they had some trouble concentrating in class. Now, I teach remotely at Kent State University, and I teach a public health class. But I can tell when students are still having some issues concentrating, even for a remote class. Now, I know that some institutions are slowly but surely making their way back on campus. Unfortunately, with the ongoing of the pandemic, in addition to everything else that is happening in the world, it's still likely that there's some trouble concentrating in class. There might just even be trouble concentrating on work itself. I know if I pick up my phone, some news story is going to pop up. It's going to tell me something new, and it's just going to take my mind off of what I may have been doing at that moment. We also have to think about our students that have dependents at home. Again, children of their own. They might have a sibling or another family member at home. And 41% of students in spring 2020 indicated that they were doing this while attending class. Now that can help us kind of pop back over into having some trouble concentrating in class, because you might be worried about your family member. You might be worried about their health or their ability to perform in school or at work. Now, speaking of work, 37% of students lost a job. We know that there were a number of furloughs, there were a number of layoffs, and even still, depending on what type of job it is, students may not have been able to recuperate from that, or it's a very slow process in that the pay may not be what it was prior to, or students are just not able to get the number of work hours that they had before. And kind of putting all of this together is really going to have an impact on our mental health. So 35% of students indicated that they had some type of moderate anxiety. And who can blame them? Again, there's so much going on in the world with the pandemic still going on, whether or not you should wear a mask, all of the other world events that are going on. It is understandable that students feel anxious about that. And it's also understandable that students might feel anxious about quite possibly a return to campus, being able to get their work done and being able to turn it in on time. So we know that there is a problem, and we have a big problem, as you can see on the screen. We have a problem between the students who are experiencing some type of basic needs and security, again, that 3 and 5. And we have a problem with these students actually being able to access the resources that are available to them. And honestly, most of the students who needed help did not get the help that they were either eligible for or that they ultimately needed. And the reasons why is they, one, have no idea that some programs exist. When you say SNAP or the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, some may think of SNAP, some may think of food stamps, and they're the same thing. One is just a former name of the other, but some people may not know the interchangeability of those terms. Some students may think that they are not eligible or that someone else who might be the next one in line behind them, that person is just more deserving of whatever it is that the resource or support is. Lastly, is kind of the bureaucracy of things, and that students just don't know how to apply for these resources. And this is not to say that in your role that you have to sit with a student and help them understand the minutia of what is going on with that application. I'm going to have a couple of action steps for you to be able to help a student or help yourself as well as a peer. So here I wanted to note that the disparity between need, so a basic needs or basic needs insecurity, and access is really an opportunity for equitable solutions. And those solutions are really going to be grounded in communication. Who does the communication? How is it done? And how often is it done? And what works? And how do you know that it works? So I ask that you just take a moment and consider where you see yourself kind of in this web of basic needs supports. You might see something that you have gotten help with. You might see something that you have suggested that a student gets help with. Lastly, you might see yourself kind of at the top, where students are referred to resources or supports, and you want to ensure that there is a good outcome. So now I want to take a moment to talk about what our college is actually doing to support students' basic needs. Kind of where does your role quite possibly fit in there? So when you're thinking about socioeconomic status and basic needs, they kind of go hand in hand, but they also go hand in hand with academic needs. And first and foremost, with thinking about communication is normalizing the conversation. Normalizing the conversation about basic needs and security, about the supports that are available, and how to best get access to those supports. Now, once this presentation is done, you will be able to click through each of these links, and that's going to take you to a guide that is going to give even more details about what's going on and how can you integrate these types of best practices into your work. But starting with normalizing the conversation is that you want to kind of be honest and open, even about your own experiences of having quite possibly a lower socioeconomic status, quite possibly having experienced basic needs insecurity, or the use of support to address that basic needs insecurity. Now, I'm asking you to only do this within your level of comfort in doing so, but this could really be something to help your students relate to you and be able to quite possibly feel comfortable asking you a few more questions about your own experiences. Some institutions have centralized their services. So if you've ever heard anything about one stop or a hub on campus. It's really to provide kind of wraparound services for students so that they only have to go to this one place on campus. Usually these places are employed, they have like a social worker or a case manager who is employed by the university, or their time is shared with an external agency like Job and Family Services or CalWorks to assist students to be able to sign up for SNAP or food stamps or CalFresh, healthcare, anything that they might need to be able to address their basic needs is again going to address their academic needs. Student engagement. Now, student engagement can happen whether you are in class or outside of class. One way that I love to bring up is this welcome survey and having a statement about basic needs and securities and supports in your syllabus. I have the same thing in mind where I tell students that within their level of comfort, I want them to come to me with problems that they might be having, whether that is trouble finding food, somewhere to stay, or just having issues with employment, money, childcare, whatever it is. Then I can take that information and with the help of kind of knowing what's on campus, what supports are available on campus, I can kind of connect the dots for that student to be able to actually access the support that they need. It is honestly better to, in my opinion, it's honestly better to have this type of language in your syllabus and let a student know that the help is available rather than a student just simply not knowing that help is available to them. And that problem that we had on a previous slide, it becomes even larger. This also speaks to engaging faculty and that it's great for one faculty member or instructor to have a syllabus statement. But if everyone can have it all together, how awesome would that be? The students know that there is a system on campus of support that they are able to access if they are having issues with something that's affecting their mental capacity, their physical capacity to show up and perform in the classroom. Now, advocacy, these are not necessarily actions that one person might be able to take, but it's really just to get your mind thinking about what has already taken place from the federal government, from the state, as well as within institutions. So one, that's scaling emergency aid, utilizing the funds that the federal government has provided for students to be able to access supports. Building out a basic needs website. If this is available at your institution, I highly recommend that you explore it. This will give you an idea of what is available on campus, or even if there are external agencies or supports that are listed, this is the type of information that can be lifted in a welcome survey as well as in the syllabus. Housing support. Now, Andrea did give me a little bit of information about kind of housing, but also transportation to and from campus and just how much it costs. Now, again, no one can kind of do this work alone, but kind of having that better understanding of what types of supports have been offered at other institutions, you might be able to have a greater understanding and appreciation for the work and the effort that your students and even your colleagues are making so that they can show up and be as present as possible in the moment for that course. And lastly is SNAP expansion. Now, if you have not heard, there has been temporary expansion of SNAP availability for college students. Now, really prior to the pandemic, for a college student that may fall between the ages of 18 to 24, and depending on what their home life looks like, they may not have been able to, they may not have been eligible and may not have been able to utilize SNAP or food stamps. So now that there is this SNAP expansion, more students are able to access SNAP and able to get food in their homes. And it is something that's still ongoing. So it is great information to kind of have in your Rolodex of resources and supports to share with your students, share amongst your peers. Okay. Now, another way that faculty or instructors, can think about engaging students to begin to normalize that conversation, build this conversation into your syllabus, and also just create awareness about what's happening for some students that have lower socioeconomic status and then may be experiencing some type of basic needs insecurity, is to kind of make it into a course project or assignment. And I really like the kind of this example assignment, and that the students are being asked to kind of create promotion materials for a center on campus. And specifically for this example, it's going to be the Basic Needs Center. But this is going to give students a way to kind of do peer-to-peer advocacy and awareness of what's going on their campus. And there are sometimes, honestly, I might say something and my students look at me like, what was it that you said? Like, that's a dated term. But having students be able to integrate their knowledge about what's going on campus, they're able to kind of share out or disseminate that information in a way that might be a bit more understandable and digestible than it might come from an instructor. So I actually wanted to ask a question for our audience. Andrea, is everyone able to unmute themselves, and even our attendees in the room?
I think so, yeah. If you guys want to unmute yourselves online, let's see. Let me see if I can. I don't want to do it for them, just in case there's somewhere where they're publishing or something. But go ahead and ask, and they'll either answer in the chat or they'll talk back.
Okay. So my question for you all is, what type of engagement have you kind of taken part in when it comes to thinking about students who might have a lower socioeconomic status and thus might have basic needs insecurities? Is there somewhere on campus that you have encouraged them to seek out support? Is there somewhere that you know of that may not have had the opportunity to share with a student that is in need of that type of support on campus? And again, feel free to, if you're able to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat of, where this is on campus, what type of support have you been able to share on campus?
I have actually used, well, at UCI we have the Fresh Hub where they provide basic needs from groceries to personal needs. I have used it, and sometimes I know some classmates or friends who don't know about it, and then if they ever like talk about that, how they need to work but there are short on time, so I refer them to it. For me it's been great, and I always encourage people to do it. However, what I noticed is some, even if they need it, they wouldn't really use it. Just like when you tell someone how to do something but they don't really do the work. But just sharing word, I think, is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where it starts, is what I mentioned, like about communicating and sharing what type of resource is available on campus. And it's also extremely understandable if, even though someone may know about this information, that they might seem still a little hesitant in actually using it. And just having them know that there is some type of support there is a great first step. So I definitely commend you in being able to share out with your friends or your peers about what it is that is available on campus, and your ability to speak from lived experience of being actually utilizing that resource yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that out.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I do see a link from Katie Thompson.
Yeah, I'll
from
just
Campus Social Work.
I'll
Okay.
put that in there. I have referred a couple of students to this campus social worker who coordinates housing and assistance for students who are undergoing serious crises and need those kinds of supports. And I've only kind of initiated the process, but I think the faculty initiate the referral and then they take it from there, and the faculty are no longer involved. So I actually haven't heard on the back end like how helpful this is for students, but it's a resource that I have used in the past.
That is so awesome. Wow, that's so awesome, and that really speaks to one at the Hope Center, like we might be doing something right with this information to share it out, but also to kind of have it come back as far as it actually working out, and faculty feeling empowered enough to get the student off to where they need to get some help. And as I mentioned, like one person cannot do it alone. So having a number of people kind of in that web of supports for students is going to be super helpful. But so often I think that faculty members, they're like, where do I fit? I'm not sure exactly what it is that I can do. I don't have a background in this. I'm not trained in this, but just having that information available to students, that is going to be so important. And students, for many of us, honestly, think about who was in your corner when you were on campus and you needed help. That's probably someone that you still remember. If you see their face in your mind, or if you can recall their name, that's going to make a much of a bigger difference to a student, rather than just saying, oh, okay, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I wish I could help you. Your assignment is still due on Wednesday. So giving grace for ourselves, but also giving grace for our students is huge. Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can.
In the live room, but this is so amazing, because we always put on our syllabi these resources for student mental health, like if they're stressed or they're dealing with a problem, to seek a counselor. But this is just some practical to, maybe have a link to a central document where you're not just addressing mental health, you're addressing all these different needs that students might have. And it's so clear. I'm like, why didn't I ever think to just put all these things on a link, on my syllabus? It's so easy to do and actionable, just to maybe centralize them to Google Doc or something like that, to a link you can just put on your syllabus, and the students would have access to a whole bunch of things, not just counseling services.
Absolutely. And I think that, Andrea, you brought up a great part about it being easy. Let's do the easy part and put this type of information out there when we know that students might face the harder part, in what was mentioned just a bit ago, in having to get the courage to actually utilize the support. So if they know that they have the support, or that they have their instructor or their faculty member behind them, and not just one, that entire system of faculty members behind them, because we want everybody to put this in their syllabus, then they might think, hey, this actually might be something that I really, want to use, or something that I might be able to check out. Maybe a friend can go with me. So that is really like, I'm glad that you found it so easy. But I want to take just a second to talk about what is easy as well. And it's not just thinking about the syllabus, but thinking about how this type of conversation can be integrated into campus events. So we know that students might show up, maybe pre-pandemic, students might show up to an event if they know that there's going to be food there. And they know that that food is, it's going to be in abundance. So they're like, all right, I can eat while I'm here. But why not, let's give them some information about basic needs, about food insecurity, housing insecurity, what can be of assistance to them, given quite possibly their low socioeconomic status, so that it's not just a one-off that they're coming to campus events, but something that is much more of a sustainable solution. So all of these things we know are slowly, again, trickling their way to get back to being on campus, get back to being in person. But just consider if there is some type of committee that you oversee or that you chair, or if you are helping students that are in a campus organization, just thinking about these types of events, these types of awareness weeks that are happening on campus, and how basic needs information can be disseminated during that time. It can honestly also be something that is integrated into a course assignment, as I mentioned before. Oh, thanks, Andrea. Great project for a student board. Absolutely. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything that is going to be such a heavy lift, but just students being able to share out that information amongst themselves, it may lead to greater use of the support or resource that, that is being advertised or marketed. I also wanted to note the number of different allies that you have on campus. So far we've talked about the syllabus being a great tool to use because you really want to start that conversation. We also talked about coursework that can be used to kind of have this conversation ongoing, in addition to the recent slide about events. But that outreach of allies, that's really going to create that system of support for a student. One person cannot do this alone. One department or one office cannot do this alone. So being able to pinpoint where these supports are across campus, and even outside of campus, it may be a community-based organization that has close ties with the institution that are able to provide support when thinking about basic needs and being able to support students who are of low socioeconomic status. They might be first-generation college attendee. They might come from a background that is a little more challenging than what some of us may be used to. But again, giving grace to these students and giving grace to ourselves to understand and be okay, to know that we don't have all the answers, but quite possibly one of our allies in the academic advising office, another in who oversees the TRIO programs, and another who is in the library. We can all kind of put our minds together and be able to come up with a sustainable and equitable solution for our students to be able to access the basic needs that they need in order to thrive both personally and academically. So with that, I wanted to close out my, presentation portion of today's discussion and to see if you all had any questions. And this can, this can come, whether you unmute yourself or it can come through the chat as well.
could start off with a question. One of the things that you talked about is that basic needs is an academic need. And I was thinking that that's true when we think about a lot of our populations of like how to, like when we think about the homelessness population, but is there anything that we can do in addition to, or is that's the first thing we need to do? And the first thing we need to do is connect people to resources, and everything else is just kind of like not just secondary as like second best, but like far, far, far below? Or like, can we explore any of those secondary options? I don't know if that makes sense.
So when you say secondary options, can you give me maybe an example of what you're thinking about?
Yeah, like some in-class activity, or like, are there accommodations that we should be doing, or like other things we should be doing in our teaching practices besides connecting people to basic need resources?
Absolutely. And
That was my question too.
okay, so what can you look for in courses as an instructor? So in regards to whether or not, like, so we have LinkedIn, right? And we have like LinkedIn Learning, and they have all of these courses about how to kind of be a better you, whatever role it is that you're in. And with basic needs insecurity and, thinking about how to best support a student, this is something that is still fresh in the minds of institutions. And for many institutions and their administrators, they're still trying to figure out, like, how did this problem happen? And this is not, the fault of any one person. This is really a systemic issue that goes far beyond today's presentation. But thinking about, what it is that instructors can do and kind of take a look at are really going to be within this. I'm going to go back to this slide. It's going to be within this slide, because this slide is going to give you a number of different guides. And the guides that we have for the Hope Center, they are really digestible in that they give you the background information about what this challenge is, but also give you like key steps in what you can do to help students or be able to address basic needs insecurity in the role in which you are currently in. So it's not necessarily that you would have to reinvent the wheel, but it does offer some flexibility. These guides offer flexibility in being able to tailor the information to be unique for whatever course it is that you're teaching, or various ways that you might want to share the information out with your students. You do have flexibility in that. So you, of course, have the syllabus statement, but if there is another way that you communicate with your students, that might be the best way that you communicate with your students. So like email, sometimes I have my students text message me, or I use Canvas, not Canva, for course announcements, then that's going to be another way to kind of get the information out there, to be able to, share out what's going on, what are maybe, and also learn about the challenges that your students are facing, but to be able to share what resources are available. Was that helpful for you?
Yeah, sounds like, well, I'll try to get those links out and share with people too.
Well, with me sharing the slides with Andrea, they should already be in the PowerPoint, so those should be kind of all ready to go for you. But if not, I'm happy to resend them out. Questions?
Questions from the group online there?
I have a very general question. Thank you so much for your presentation. Really helpful to think about the resources on campus and ease of access. Really appreciated hearing about it. Earlier, you mentioned the idea of having a sense of grace for students and student needs with the things that they're trying to juggle, not just assignment deadlines, but all of the other things that are going on in their lives. And I had a question about the methods for creating that that grace for assignments. I've tried a few different ways of changing deadlines to be more flexible, having students communicate if they needed an extra 24 hours, no questions asked, no approval necessary, that kind of thing. But I've found that in really large classes, as the pandemic's gone on, I've sometimes had cases where 60% or more of students are automatically taking those extensions every time and then not following through after the grace period. And so I'm trying to figure out ways to provide that for students who need it, but also support the students who need the guidance and need the schedule that seem to fall through the cracks if there isn't a specific time that something's due.
Yeah, that is definitely tough. Thank you, Chris, so much for bringing that up. And I'm going to speak from a place where it's more of my instructor hat rather than my Hope Center hat, because this is very unique in itself, is that, you know, we have to give ourselves grace and we have to give our students grace. But we also need to be realistic about how the students will be able to go through the material and be able to have enough time to think critically about the material and then complete whatever assignment it is that they need to complete. It's definitely worthwhile of kind of quite possibly asking your students, maybe utilizing that survey. It doesn't necessarily have to be a welcome survey at this point, but maybe putting together a very brief survey to understand what are the types of challenges that students are facing at this time. And it might be helpful to have it where the students can respond to it anonymously. Even though you're seeing that 60% is taking that extension, but maybe only a quarter are actually, you know, able to still meet the deadline. There's a gap there. It's still something going on there. And while I think this topic is still so new, the Hope Center, we don't have any information on this just yet. But this is something that I am definitely going to kind of take back to my team to, you know, really think about if there is much more of that concentration, kind of that concentration gap that we have not touched on just yet. Not to say that it has been missed, but something that we might need to take a little of a deeper dive into. Because I don't want to leave you on the hook with saying that there's no easy answer to that. There's no easy solution to that. I wish there was. I take the thumbs up, thank you. But this is definitely something that I have been contending with in even my own class of 40 students, where I'm seeing that maybe one student or two students, they're really having to contact me and ask me for extensions. But this is why I put it into my syllabus. I want you to ask for these extensions now rather than 2 days before final exams start. And there's really no way to help you out, and just being empathetic of what is all going on. I don't know if you all saw my 4-year-old walk in, but I have little ones at home. I know students have little ones at home as well. So with that, I feel that I am able to offer that grace, but understand that we still have kind of a job to do. And if there are supports that I can provide for my student to be able to be successful in the class, then I am willing to offer that to them.
I have a question. I wanted to know, what do you think with the transition back? A lot of students have been learning from home. We kind of semi-transitioned back live this quarter. We're having trouble kind of getting students to come back. What's going to be the biggest socioeconomic stressor for students as they have to return live to campus as opposed to the past few years of learning remotely?
It's going to be thinking about where that student is in their academic journey. Did they start out attending college completely virtual, or are they, I guess now maybe what we can maybe call a traditional student is that you started attending college pre-pandemic. So it's really going to be understanding what are those complexities of the campus, kind of the campus culture, I guess. So if parking was an issue even prior to the pandemic, and it's not just maybe the availability of parking spaces, but transportation in itself. If students do not have vehicles of their own or one that they can borrow, thinking about the price of gas, and also thinking about the maintenance of the car. The car is a basic need, or having transportation, and reliable and safe transportation is a basic need. So if students are not able to meet that need, then it is likely that they will not be able to meet the need of their academic responsibilities either. Some students may feel that they need to make a decision as they are thinking about, okay, I'm going back to campus, but gas is, how much is gas in California?
It's almost $5 a gallon. No, it's the biggest student complaint that I get is that the commuting students, so expensive for them to just get here. And my next question was just, do you know of any resources for students that pay for gas or commuting?
Yeah, so it's really going to be thinking about those emergency aid dollars and how the institution has already has it set up with like emergency grants. Because typically those grants can be used for academics, but they can also be used for any other financial or monetary need that a student has. So if they need to fix a car up, if they need to purchase gas, if they need to ride public transportation in order to get to campus, that is the type of funding that would be available to them. But it's also considering what type of partnerships have been established with either like rideshare programs where it might be a reduced cost for the ride itself, or maybe depending on the socioeconomic status of a student, that the ride is already covered. It really, unfortunately, with so much that we have going on, an easy fix is not always an easy fix. It's just like, oh, get an Uber, oh, get a Lyft. And these type of things did not necessarily, exist before. But it's just thinking about how can students best use them. So again, as I mentioned to Chris with kind of an in-class survey of what are the challenges that students are facing, maybe asking students with a survey, what are quite possibly maybe ranking the different ways that they would be able to come to campus. If it is using a car, whether it's their own or one that's for public transportation, using a rideshare service, things like that. So then it is maybe not so much of racking your brain of how to prioritize what type of resource you may want to go after, but kind of having the students tell you with their responses of what's most important to them, because you already know what the greatest challenge is for them. It might even be for yourselves. So just kind of just putting yourself in their shoes. And I know that you all have probably done that a number of times in trying to think about like, what is the best solution if I were a student and I was like in this situation.
And I'm just thinking it's another great project for a student organization to organize rideshare or something like that. If it doesn't already exist. Go ahead, Katie. Sorry.
No, that's a great comment. I was wondering about offering grace to students at scale, because I co-teach 2 of the intro bio sections, and each of those has about 400 students. So when I'm teaching, I have 800 students. And so my policy has been to kind of like have like blanket programs where, you know, they can drop grades and there's all that kind of like built-in flexibility. But then, especially for situations when students are encountering crises, right? You know, it doesn't really help with the like recurring issues of commuting is always expensive, right? But it helps with the situation where like something urgently happened in their family or their life this week and they can't do stuff this week. But when I offer those kinds of flexibilities in the syllabus for all of the students, they all kind of like take it as a given. And then when they enter in a crisis, they expect to get an additional flexibility. And so then I feel kind of rude to say, no, I'm not going to offer you anything, even though you've just told me that you've gone through this particular rough patch, because there's the drop in the syllabus that's kind of so do you have other ways to think about how to build in flexibility at scale when I'm dealing with 800 students and I can't, I just don't have the bandwidth to engage deeply with each of them on these kind of issues?
Absolutely. So my initial thoughts would be just kind of thinking about how to consider it at scale, but consider it at scale at different times. So if this is a fall course, or let's put it, if this is a spring course, what might be happening where, you know, students might be going through hardships? Just thinking about blanket, like high level hardships, not necessarily the nitty gritty of what like family issues students might be going through. So in kind of considering it that way and quite possibly aligning that what's going on university-wide, definitely spring break. I don't know if students like still take spring break. I don't know if that's still a thing, but if there is a time where their focus on the class may not be as sharp as it was the week prior or the month prior, maybe once a month, thinking about what's the give me for a student, and still just those times where students might be able to come for office hours. I hope not all 800 at one time, but thinking about how students can come in for office hours, expressing to them how important that is, especially if they are having some type of issue. And again, like reiterating that it is best that you come to me early rather than too late in the semester, because I mean, as an instructor, your hands are tied and you still, you know, you don't want to come off as rude or as lacking sympathy in what they have going on, but you still have, you know, a duty to the other 799 of your students, and that you still have to be able to maintain those deadlines that you had already established in the semester, understanding that there is, you know, room for flexibility, but just being able to give, like, you have to give yourself grace, and you are not going to be able to grade all of those assignments or read through all of those comments at one time when you've given an extension to everybody all at one time. So it's kind of a push and pull there. But I would also encourage you to, as you interact with instructors from other departments or other colleges within your institution, ask them what they have going on. How are they able to address this type of issue with their students? Is there maybe not a university-wide policy that could be put into place, but something that is kind of a shared understanding amongst faculty as much as possible to talk about or to be able to integrate those drop days or give me days where students are able to utilize them to the best of their ability and not necessarily feel the pressure all the time of the course, but as an instructor, you're able to still fulfill your role for your students.
Great, thank you so much.
Hey, don't tell them till the end. It's the only way.
I think that's what I'm going to do next time.
Yeah.
You're everyone's friend.
Any other questions from our audience or comments from our audience? You all have definitely given me things to think about as I go back to my grade book for my students. I definitely owe them a couple of things that need to be graded. So I'm thinking about how to best approach that for them, definitely for those who may have asked for a bit of an extension.
I guess I would want to ask, is there anything that, if some of these students are teaching assistants or they're learning assistants, are there any kind of red flags or things to watch for in your students, signs that they may be under duress or they may be dealing with socioeconomic distress? And then what are kind of the regular, how do you go about not outing a student? When you want to kind of approach them and help, but you don't want to insult them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So taking a look at their attendance, even if it's a completely online course, if you're seeing that the engagement of a student, whether if they're not submitting their assignments, or if you're just kind of seeing that their assignments are not very, they don't necessarily demonstrate critical thinking in their assignments, reaching out to them is going to be absolutely key. And this is definitely, it goes along with just saying, at the start of the class, it's really never too late to really say this, that you are there to help your students and that you are there to offer support to your students in whatever way that you are able to do. Because a student might come with something that is really a heavy topic where you may not know off the top of your head what type of resource or support that they are able to offer. But this really speaks to one, having that as much transparency as possible with your student, but then also thinking about those allies that were listed on the slide and getting in contact with them. It might be at first, if the student is able to share with you what they have going on, asking your colleagues, quite possibly within the counseling, department, if I had a student who, let me know that X, Y, and Z is going on, what are the ways that I might be able to help them? Or if there is, I think it's the social work, a resource, or the campus social work resource that Katie shared. If they offer more services than just like with housing, seeing if there is a, I'm trying to see if there is some type of resource that they have as far as being able to share information for a student, and maybe their office just reaches out to them so that you have, I guess, transferred, I don't want to say transfer that responsibility, because that student is still a part of your responsibility. They're a part of your campus community. But you have brought awareness to the fact that there might be something wrong. And I know that, you know, we don't want to say anything or offer anything that might be insulting to a student. And, you know, given the weight of today's climate, it is better to say something than to not say anything at all. So reaching out to the resources that are available on campus, again, kind of with the example of the Office of Campus Social Work, as well as the Wellness, Health, and Counseling Services. They may be really good resources to reach out to be able to, you know, see those red flags and understand when a student is going or is having distress. And I actually just looked up the mental health training webinars for faculty. Andrea, is it something that is required for staff to take a look at, or is it just kind of as needed?
I mean, we get training about if a student comes to you with a problem and they, you know, you're supposed to refer them to, like, you know, don't try to counsel a student. You're not a professional to do that, but to kind of like you're saying, refer them to social services. I was just wondering if there were any like telltale signs or anything that you had of what to look for. And I think what your answer was great, which was, you know, look for a drop off in their attendance, or, you know, maybe they are struggling getting to campus. Maybe it's not just disinterest, you know. We always tend to assume now they're just disinterested, or they think they have something better to do, but it could actually be something else. And I liked your answer. It was good.
It's honestly so difficult, and it's a really good question that you asked, and it's honestly so difficult on the instructor or the faculty member, because students may exhibit ways of distress or moments of distress so many different ways, where it might be very difficult to pinpoint, you know, what might be disinterest for one student is, you know, a student that was typically engaged, where they're just not engaged anymore. And there could be a number of reasons why. So it's important to, if the student is disengaged, then you are still going to, you know, get some type of communication from me to ask you what's going on. You know, are you okay? And if you are a student that is truly in need, okay, let's figure out how to best help you. Let's talk to my colleagues at the counseling center or within the wellness center, so that, you know, you feel as though you do have someone who is able to help you.
Okay, any last questions? Otherwise, I think, you know, I really just love this talk because it just gave us so many very clear, actionable things that we could do on campus. Really.
Well, thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was so much fun. And it's not just a presentation for me. This is definitely, like, some of the questions that you all asked me and things that you brought up are what I will kind of take back to not only my position at the Hope Center, but just how I perform as an instructor for my public health students.
Okay, well, thank you very much. How do you sign off? Do you want to?
No, I think for those of you online, we know who you are, and so we'll send you a follow-up. So thank you so much for coming. And then those of you who are in the room, if you could just use the QR code and sign in, then we'll know and be able to have more programming like this. And yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for your time to give us ideas and even giving us resources to keep thinking about this afterwards.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you again for having me. And Andrea, I am saving the slides now because I know as soon as I get off of this call, a 4-year-old is going to come in and talk to me. So I'm going to send you the slides right after this. It's going to be in a PDF.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, there's
Awesome.
the chat. There's a survey to fill in after the meeting.
We'll send you the survey by email. As long as you logged in with an email address, we'll be able to send it to you through your email address. If not, contact either Andrew, Nicholas, or me, and we'll send it to you too. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Have a great evening, everyone.